Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable Mayor Amor Mortley, Acting Minister of Education, Technological and Vocational Training, Senator the Honorable Lucille Moore, Pro Vice Chancellor and Principal Professor Eugene Barreto, Permanent Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister, Ms. Alice Jordan, Deputy Principal Professor Clive Landis, Campus Bursar, Ms. Lisa Aline, Deans, Heads of Departments, Director of Higher Education Development Unit, Mr. Patrick Rowe, Personal Aide to the Prime Minister, Mrs. Jessica Odell Barrell, Personal Assistant to the Prime Minister, Ms. Ashanta Cadogan, Public Relations Officer, Government Information Service, Mrs. Sharon Austin Gilmore, staff and students of the Cavehill campus. Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Charleston Lovell, the Communications Officer, and it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to this forum, a conversation with the Prime Minister. This is the first opportunity that we have had to host the Honorable Mayor Amor Mortley since her elevation to the Prime Ministership of Barbados, and we are certainly honored to have her present to staff and students in a forum such as this. Prime Ministers are rarely this accessible. However, this has become an increasingly signature feature of Ms. Mortley's administration, where she avails herself for frank discussions with specific interest groups, as well as the country at large. We anticipate that it will be an engaging and enlightening exchange because Ms. Mortley is not unfamiliar with the University of the West Indies, nor with this campus. The Prime Minister is a former Minister of Education. It was her first ministerial portfolio, in fact. I am tempted to say decades ago, but I know you'll look at her and say that that cannot be possible. She has served as chair of the University Grants Committee, a regional body that has oversight of the UWI and which gives approval to all UWI operational budgets. Ms. Mortley was a member of cabinet in the 1994 to 2008 Barbados Labour Party administration, which enabled the Cavehill campus to expand its footprint in a significant way by allowing this campus to practically double its original physical size when the BLP government, led by Mr. Oinatha, made a substantial gift of about 35 acres of land at Wanstead, Paradise Heights, and Lazaretto to the university. This prime real estate, which was much sought after by business interests, enabled the campus to develop in a phenomenal way, adding its creative arts complex adjacent to the main entrance, a third student dormitory, namely the Keith Hunt Hall, and the impressive Usain Bolt complex with its internationally rated football and athletic track. This evening, Ms. Mortley is here renewing her acquaintance with the university and reaffirming her commitment to the institution at a significant time and in a very special circumstance. Under her leadership as Barbados' eighth Prime Minister and its first female Prime Minister, the Cavehill campus has seen a resurgence in its enrollment and a renewed vibrancy on its grounds. You simply have to stroll across the campus to feel the student energy, much of which has stemmed from her government honoring its promise to reintroduce state-funded tuition fees. And I'd ask you please to help me welcome and thank the Prime Minister for that. Those who entered to study for an undergraduate degree this year must have felt the same sense of gratitude and relief as the initial cohort of 118 at Cavehill's original harbor location in 1963, and the many thousands who have since followed them into higher education at Cavehill. The Prime Minister has always been very passionate about young people. I would perhaps agree with the assessment from Black Eyed Peas that the most powerful force on the planet is the energy of our youth. And I see some quizzical expressions as people wonder which Black Eyed Peas he's referring to. I believe, though, that I can confidently go on a limb by stating that both the Prime Minister and the Principal share a love of music and are well aware of the musical group that goes by that name. Also, their belief in the force of the youth underpins their own philosophy that students should be at the heart and center of education, that their youthful energy needs to be activated and stimulated through transformative educational change for economic success. We will hear from both the Prime Minister and the Principal this evening, so I've got a feeling that tonight is going to be a good night. I now invite our principal, Professor Eugene Barto. I now invite our principal, Professor Eugene Barto, who needs no introduction to this audience, to address the gathering. Professor Barto.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Lawal. I was going to sit, but I can let the Prime Minister. Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable Mia Amor Motley, Acting Minister of Education, the Minister of Education, Technological and Vocational Training, Senator, the Honorable Lucille Moore. A very special welcome to you. You and I know what that means. Permanent Secretary in the Office of, I know Ms. Jordan hasn't arrived yet. Deputy Principal, Professor Clive Landis, Campus Bursa. And could you just indicate who you are when I say that so that the Prime Minister knows? In the front row, Prime Minister is the senior management of the campus. So I'll start over. Deputy Principal, Professor Clive Landis, Campus Bursa, Ms. Lisa Aline, the Deans, Dean Robinson, Faculty of Social Sciences, Faculty of Law, Dean Berry, Faculty of Medicine, Dean Adams, Campus Registrar, Kenneth Walters. Y'all throw me off. A Dean of the Faculty of Science and Technology, Dean Dean, Campus Coordinator, Director of Graduate Studies and Research, Professor Winston Moore, Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Education, Professor Evelyn O'Callaghan, President of the Guild of Students, Mr. Christian Atong, and of course, from the Ministry of Education, Director of Higher Education Development. He almost feels as one of our he is in the front row, but one of us, Mr. Patrick Rowe. And the Public Relations Officer of the Government Information Service, Mrs. Sharon Austin Gilmore, staff and students of the Cavehill campus, ladies and gentlemen, everyone who here, thank you very much for being here. This is very much the Prime Minister's evening. We are delighted that she has managed to carve a space in her very busy day to agree to visit us and have a conversation with us. This morning she was in Parliament. After Parliament, she had another meeting. I know that when she leaves here, she's traveling to a regional meeting in Trinidad and Tobago. So I really want you to thank the Prime Minister of Barbados, the first female Prime Minister, for making time to be with us. So, Prime Minister, I think from that you have a sense that you are extremely welcome at the Cavehill campus. We have been making adjustments to accommodate you. And of course, we have all the staff, all the students, these young people here in this special black shirt with some, all the names of the different positions representing the Guild Council, members of the Guild Council. I wanted to say before I turn it over to the Prime Minister, because this is not one of the typical principal's address. I just laying the ground for the Prime Minister to come to talk to you. But I wanted to say to the Prime Minister that we welcome her educational philosophy, which I'm going to ask her to spell out to you. And it dovetails very nicely with the philosophy of the Cavehill campus. We are all about revitalizing the development of Barbados and the region. And 2 weeks ago, we celebrated the 70th anniversary of the University of the West Indies with a special ceremony, and we honored 70 outstanding alumni of the Cavehill campus. And the Prime Minister sent us a message, and in that message, she said Barbados was with UWI at the beginning. Barbados will always be with UWI because there will be no ending between Barbados and UWI. This is my ad-libbing at the end, but it was her way of saying that Barbados and UWI, we can always count on the government of Barbados to support the UWI. So again, I want you to thank her for that on our behalf. And as we all know, Barbados is going through a structural adjustment program. And again, the Cavehill campus, this year we established the Center for Professional Development and Lifelong Learning. And I want to say to the Prime Minister that within the Center for Professional Development and Lifelong Learning, we have a suite of very relevant courses that can be part of the the retraining and retooling program. I am going to present you with a catalog of these courses because I want you to know that not only that we do degree programs, but we do certificate programs, we do short specialized training because we are here to assist in whatever ways that we can. And before you leave here, I will present you with this catalog that could be turned over to your personal training department and the Ministry of Education. We have lots of plans at the Cavehill campus, but as I said, this is not my evening. This is the Prime Minister's evening, and I know you want to hear from her, so I offer again my own welcome and ask you to join me in welcoming the Prime Minister of Barbados to talk with us.
Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I have this very brief and pleasant task of telling you a little bit about the Prime Minister. I know that the principal, she really needs no introduction to this audience, but this is being streamed. You know what I want? Okay.
Give her 2 lines.
Okay. Just a little bit about the...
Just caught between his boss and the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Charleston. The best introduction is the hug. Principal of Cavehill, senior management and leadership of Cavehill, students of Cavehill, everyone, Minister Moore, and members of the Public Service of Barbados. I feel as though I'm coming home because I keep telling persons that 7 of the best years of my life were spent in the Ministry of Education, Youth and Culture. And it was fortuitous because it allowed me to understand what development is all about. That development begins and ends with who we are. That formal education and non-formal education is ultimately where it is at and where it will be at. And for us in this country, there is no better example of us trying to achieve that at the post-secondary level than the University of the West Indies, because it contextualizes not only our national mission as a country, but also what is our regional civilization, that of the Caribbean. So to be here this evening is a very special privilege. And I think the principal has already told you that today was a day that I didn't exactly pick to end up this way, but I knew that the one place that I had to be, even if for a limited period of time, is here with you. And I start at that point because on this campus, I've known the best and the worst in my life. On this campus, the very first Saturday after I was sworn in as a cabinet minister, I came here, and on that Saturday morning, some youngsters presented me with a cup that I had up until a few years ago when somebody visiting my house broke it. And it was a very sad moment, because it was a cup that encapsulated very simply a motivational sentence for me. This generation will change the world. Similarly, on this campus, I have known what it is to face my greatest fear, which I didn't know that I had. And that was, with Sir Keith Hunt, walking up on those buildings that are now the accommodation of students, reaching the top, in the middle of construction, no banisters, and then realizing that I was suffering from vertigo. So when I say to you that I've known the best and the worst on this campus, trust me when I tell you that I've known the best and the worst. But in between, I've also known what it is to understand what the Caribbean is. And the University of the West Indies gave me an intense appreciation of being able to meet with, relate to, learn from the greatest of the Caribbean intellectual icons that we have seen in the modern Caribbean. Persons like Sir Alistair McIntyre, Rex Nettleford, and I can go on and on and on with names. I've never had the luxury of addressing a Cavehill graduation, but perhaps one of my greatest moments, and that's not asking, I do enough speeches. Anybody who knows me knows that I prefer conversations. But I did address the Mona graduation in the year 2000. And for me, it was special because not only was it the turn of the millennium, you will soon learn something about me. Not only was it the turn of the millennium, but on that evening, the university honored Chris Blackwell, but more importantly, Jimmy Cliff. Wow. And Justin told you that I love music. And Jimmy Cliff, for me, was a childhood icon. So that there could have been no greater moment for me than to have been given the privilege to address the university at the turn of the millennium with the honoring, I think for the first time in Jamaica, of a creative person in that respect, and one whose words continue to inspire me. You can get it if you really want, but you must try, and try. You'll succeed at last. And perhaps it's in that vein that I want to speak to you this evening, because President Obama said very often that history doesn't go in a straight line. And he's correct. And those who will have to write the history of this campus will come to write that it didn't go in a straight line. I know what it is as a Minister of Education between 1994 and 1999 to see the enrollment of this campus virtually double. As did, I see Dr. Henry here, she knows what I'm talking about. She was in the ministry at the time. As did the enrollment at Community College and the Polytechnic. And I know what it is now to recognize that in a period of difficult decisions, that it becomes all the more critical to say what you stand for and to fight what you stand for. There has never been any doubt, never in my mind, as to what is our responsibility as a nation and to whom we must exercise that responsibility. We cannot, in this country, seek to be global citizens if we are not prepared to educate our people. And I want to repeat it because the absence of an education is a death sentence. Many take it for granted, and many assume that, oh, you can come from a family and that family can help you because they themselves have come out of poverty. But the last time I checked, those families are subject also to other social ills or to divisions. And what we will do is to guarantee those at the very bottom, and then those in the middle will be condemned to whether their family is strong enough to withstand divorce or some kind of abuse or some kind of addiction, and therefore whether that child is lucky enough not to have a father or mother who says to them, I'm sorry, you got to make it on your own. And when they start the course of life, then realize that life is so much more complicated, and some just don't make it. We have determined that we have a responsibility to our children because we have a responsibility to our nation. We have a responsibility to our children because we have a responsibility to the stability of our future. And it means that things will be hard. Don't fool yourself. Life does not come in a straight line. Not for the university, not for each of us. And each of us will go through ups and downs. I see Cynthia here, and she knows from some of the very difficult days that I had in opposition when she interviewed me and wrote a piece on me, that it really does not come in a straight line. And I want each of you to remember that, because the fact that a country confers on you the luxury of an opportunity of an education does not preclude you from playing your role and understanding that you can't sit down and play dead when challenges or difficulties come your way. Similarly, there are challenges that we face as a nation. But we've chosen you because we see you as critical to this country's stability and future. And we recognize, however, that this is only one part of the equation. It will come as a surprise to some of you to know that while I will be the first to commit to the country paying for your tuition fees, I feel strongly that you as individual students have to carry the responsibility and costs of some of the guild activities and the other optional activities that you participate in this university. I equally feel strongly that if the country is prepared to put aside the equivalent of just 1.5% of GDP, and I put it in those terms rather than bald numbers, because you need to understand the context of the relationship of what we're doing, then you have also to be prepared to give back of your time to the country and to your community and to the people. For those who are lawyers, that means getting involved in legal aid clinics organized at a national level. For those who are doctors, that means community practice and nursing and gathering information. For those who are engineers working in construction. For those who are social workers, we have too many elderly people living on their own in this country who do not know what it is to interact with anybody, and for whom the opportunity to be able to have that kind of support and kind of interaction will be worth a ton of gold. And for those who are young kids, whose father or mother, for whatever reason, cannot be there, either because they're working or they're living overseas or they may be otherwise detained, we need to be able to have young people who are prepared to mentor these young kids, who at that tender age need to feel that somebody special was there for me. Somebody gave me that extra belief in myself. Somebody gave me that passion to allow me to be able to fight when the water was choppy and when I thought I might not make it. And you have to help us play that role, because however which way we look at it, a government by policy alone cannot inspire that young child, that young boy, that young girl to move to the next level. Yes, icons do, like Jimmy Cliff, but at the end of the day, who is that person who was close to you that you could speak to outside of the family unit that gave you the inspiration to keep walking? Was it a teacher? Was it a preacher? Was it a prefect? Was it a big sister? Was it somebody who lived next door? Who was it? And each of you, for whom we have now removed the burden of having, and I see Kimar who ran against me and who I salute for doing that. But who I know could only be here full time because the government was prepared now to pay fees. Because if not, he would have to be working and studying at the same time. And at the end of the day, we recognize that while we make it possible for you to focus on your studies, that you have to help us carry the burden of nation building, which means helping to raise our boys and our girls, to protect our senior citizens, and to protect the integrity of our social capital in this country. If you can help us do that, we can walk the full distance with you. If you can help us do that, we are going to make sure that nobody will stop you from getting an education in this country. Will we always be flush? No, we won't. Justin, we're not flush now. You know it. You sit on the central bank board. Dr. Moore, you know it. But at the end of the day, what we are is making decisions in the interest of growth of this nation. And that decision for growth starts first with our people. But there's some other issues that we need to also contextualize. You know, I've set some very simple objectives for the government. And in the words of Martin Luther King, I may not get there with you, but I want us to stay focused on them. By 2030, every child under the age of 18 in this country should have been given an opportunity to be bilingual. Whether it is Spanish and English, whether it is Mandarin and English, you cannot live in today's world without the functionality of being able to communicate in multiple languages. Every child under the age of 18 should have been exposed to the ability to swim. We live in a jurisdiction that's serious. It sounds simple, but it's real. Because if you are frightened for the thing that surrounds you, you're frightened for the world. So the first thing you have to do is to conquer fear. And I'll tell you a little story about that in a second. But you have to conquer fear. But secondly, our maritime jurisdiction is 400 times our land size. And this century is going to be the century where we have both to protect and conserve, but also to get the best economic return without undermining the integrity and quality of our marine environment. And that is why, for the first time, I have appointed to the Cabinet of Barbados a Minister of Maritime Affairs and Blue Economy, because we have to protect what we have. How many in this room have ever seen a cobbler? And most of the people who put in out the hands are either bald or gray. Do you even know what cobblers are? Huh? A cobbler is like a black sea egg, sea urchin. And when we were children and you walked on the West Coast, predominantly, you'd get cobblers' spikes, these black spikes in the bottom of your foot. And your grandmother would tell you that you had to use soft candle to take it out. Or for certain men, they used to use a hot substance that was owned by them. And that would release the spikes from coming out of your heel. The mere fact that you can go now and walk the coast of this country and don't butt up on any cobblers tells you what is happening to our maritime environment. So we have to be able to hold the environment in which we live. And you will see Barbados take more and more of a global leadership position for one simple reason. When I addressed the UN a few weeks ago, I spoke of a map that has haunted me ever since I saw it. And that is a map of the world that has simply on it color coding according to 0 to 3 degrees, 3 to 5, 5 and higher. And the countries that are affected with 0 to 3 are the Greenland, the summer Antarctic and Arctic sheets, not the winter ones, the summer ones, and the Coral Islands. Now, what does that tell you? That we are dispensable and disposable. Because the very same world has agreed to 2 degrees and higher, even though it has said that it would like to aspire to 1.5 degrees. And we know that 1.5 means that there will be seawater rise of at least a meter. 2 degrees probably means 1.5 meters or so. That's a frightening thing. And it's frightening for those of you who are younger, because there are coastal sites and installations to which we are have become familiar that may not be there when she is 50 years old. And I used to say to the youth arm of my party, I'm not sure that they understood it or took it with passion, and I hope that if I leave here with nothing else this evening, it is to create an army, what I call a people's movement, because a people's movement is stronger than any government. And you don't need to be at the center of North America or Europe to be global leaders. You can do it from Cavehill. But we need a movement that starts to take back the environment in which we live in this world, and that says that some may have thought that we were dispensable and disposable 2 and 3 centuries ago, but we are here as a very living embodiment of a people who refuse to be categorized yet again as disposable and dispensable. And as much as I talk, even from the position of Prime Minister, my words have little or no value unless they are buttressed by a people's movement. I asked the young people in my party, and as I said, I wish they had taken it on, that they must be the advocates for the preservation of the environment in which you are going to live, because you are the ones who are going to be on the front line of the battles. You are the ones who are going to continue to have to face the horrific floods, Christian, out of Trinidad this weekend. Or the ones who last year in Dominica saw trees debarked like if they were skinning. Somebody was skinning the trees with perfect precision, only to have 226% of the country's total production completely obliterated. Or we forget Montserrat, that is a shadow of what it was, to the point where there's some of you in this room who don't know when Montserrat was fully functional and fully the Emerald Isle. And I say to you that almost everything that we do will revolve around 2 poles and then values. The pole of people development, that's what education and health ultimately is about, formal and non-formal education. And I'll come back to the non-formal because that's just my euphemism in an academic environment for cultural rootedness. And secondly, the environment in which we live. And all of this has to be buttressed upon a platform of values, because without values, we are nobody. Without an essence and a core of who we are, not just spiritually, but the difference between right and wrong, the ability to stand up for something, the ability to be able to speak truth to power, to reflect courage, to reflect empathy and caring. These are the things that matter, to have honesty. These are the things that matter. And that your journey through this institution and thereafter as citizens of this nation is to reflect the embodiment of these things so that you can perpetuate them when we who are here on this platform are long gone. Because at the end of the day, that is what it is all about. There's some youngsters in here. There's a book that Carrie Levitt wrote, which perhaps for me is a compendium of essays called The Right to Development. And she was one of your people at Mona, wasn't she? That is perhaps one of the best books that all who are studying at tertiary institutions, in my view, should read. Not only does it contain the wonderful series of letters between her and Michael Manley in understanding his ability to be able to navigate the leadership of a country that literally confronted global forces that were fearsome. But it also speaks to a commitment to excellence and to nation building and development. That's not just, if you're an economist, about the numbers. If we want it to be about the numbers, let me play a video game. For real. But it has to be about people development. And judgments have to be exercised ultimately about that such that you can't separate yourself from that. And that's why you hear me talking to you about giving back as we help you. Similarly, it has to be about protecting our environment. There's no part of this world you can go now without seeing the signs of climate change. And you know what will be the two most valuable things, and the country is not yet coming to grips with it, but we're going to have a long and deep conversation on it. Water and food. Water and food. We pay probably what I think is 30-something cents a litre for water at homes, in our homes. We pay 40-something cents in businesses, I'm told. We sell to cruise ships for 80-something cents. But how many people in here have bought water from the gas station recently? How many people buy water on a daily basis? You're paying $4 or $5 for the same litre. Because it's a commodity. A bottle of water is more expensive than a beer. You check it? A bottle of water is more expensive than a beer, than a Coke. And it is largely because it is that prized commodity for which countries and civilizations have gone to war and will continue to go to war. Food is going to be equally as critical. Study ahead and ask if Hurricane Maria or Irma had hit Miami at the same time that it was hitting us, what would have happened to our food supply in the region? And it's no sense telling me, oh, you were able to get food in 2-3 weeks' time, because at the end of the day, anybody who has been in an aftermath of a hurricane, as I was with Gilbert, knows full well that access to food and national security in the first 3-4 days is the most important thing, because human beings begin to behave in a way that you don't want to see if they do not have access to food, and especially when they have not prepared for the storm. So how we manage these things going forward are part and parcel of our national and regional conversation. And in a very real sense, before I call the next election, most of you will be working. Before I call the next election, most of you will be working. You may say that I'm taking an example out of Prime Minister Stewart, and therefore it is 4 years, 8 months, and 90 days. But the point that I'm making to you is that it seems easy now, because many of you are on this side of the equation, not yet confronting perhaps the full rigors and reality of what life will thrust upon you. But very shortly, you will be on the other side. And very shortly, you're going to have to play your role. And very shortly, you're going to have to determine, what am I going to do that goes beyond my duty to myself, my family, and my church, my religion, whatever it is. In other words, what will you do that allows you to be that social animal to help carry the weight as we have committed to carry for you to be here? And if you don't carry that forward, then we run the risk of another 13th of August 2013. And what was the 13th of August 2013 famous for? I'm amazed. Only Justin knows. On the 13th of August 2013 is when this country's future was placed on pause and this institution's development was put at risk. That was the day on which it was announced that we would no longer pay tuition fees for Barbadian students across this country. I'm going to pause at this stage, but before I do, the principal has already advised me that there were 3 programs which people hitherto would have paid for on their own. And because of that, the university immediately assumed, they said, that they would continue so to do. We have agreed that we will pay for all Barbadian students. And I intend to do that even for those 3 programs. There are some conversations which we will have with the university on efficiency gains that have nothing at all to do with access. But mercifully, I get to chair the University Grants Committee in a week's time. And therefore, I can deal with those efficiency gains at that level rather than denying access to persons. But I also want to be clear, because the one thing that I have committed myself to at this age with gray hair always to be, is to be frank and honest. And therefore, at some point, we are going to have to determine the profile of what we are offering. And a university must be a university, not a training ground. So I understand that. Because if we don't have people who can think, the civilization is undermined. By the same token, I can't go and buy a Rolls Royce if I only have money for a Toyota. I might aspire to a Rolls Royce, but we're going to do that in a structured and coherent way that allows everybody to plan and allows us to have a quality output that everybody can continue to say that we're not among the top 5% or 3% or 2%, but we're among the best. And the best means the best. I end with this. 10 years ago, 11 years ago, I met with the then Vice Chancellor and Principal of Cavehill campus. And I said then something to which I hold, the 2 points actually, which I hold firmly today. Barbados, and because of decisions we'll make in the next few weeks, you'll understand it more, must engage the world. We no longer have the luxury of what is domestic and what is international. For us, our business is global. The world is our business is the world. And you have to come up with that confidence and be ready to engage the world with that confidence. But I said then that I feel strongly that the University of the West Indies ought to have a college, and we will give you access to land on the East Coast, that allows you to do 2 private sector-driven disciplines and 2 public sector-driven disciplines, where you literally take the best students from universities across the world. So you take some of the best from China and Korea, South Korea, some of the best from India, some of the best from Latin America, some of the best from Europe, some of the best from the Middle East. But in whatever 4 disciplines you choose, I'm not choosing for you. In the same way that we did with, and I hope to be able that we can put more emphasis on it, in what we did with Folkestone and McGill. But we need to choose 4 disciplines. And we need to do exchange programs for you going to those universities and their students coming here. Because nobody must ask in 10 years' time, where is Barbados? And if we do that, we change forever our foreign policy, our diplomacy, and our international trade. And our diplomacy, for the most part, has now to be rooted in a commercial diplomacy because our business is global. Our business is the world, and the world is our business. But our business is not only business in the world. Our business is advocacy in the world. Our business is to preserve a global environment from the ravages of climate change. And our business is to protect a global civilization that needs to be rooted in democracy, the rule of law, and social justice. That is who Barbados is. And that is who you must help us retain the ability to be, because that's what we inherited from those who went before me. And I sat like you. I remember, and I probably will be one of the last persons who can say that I have known every single Prime Minister of Barbados, literally. So I carry with me a burden of what I feel they fought for and why it is critical that we do not allow it to be wasted or lost, because there is such a thing as failed societies. And it is up to us to lift up that legacy, however tarnished or scraped it may have become recently. Clean it off, and to recognize that I may not help you finish the race, but I'm going to carry my leg of the relay in the hope that you use this time to pick up your leg and carry it for this country that has been good to all of us. Any questions? Guess none. The second thing I wanted to say to you, and I can't do this until we get some money, but I feel that every student on this campus ought to spend 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months, first and foremost in another Caribbean campus, and if not, another part of the world. That was actually the Millennium Project that I put on the table at Mona in the year 2000 when I did the Millennial Address. I feel it more than ever because this country suffered from the worst effects of xenophobia. And in fact, as a result of it, Barbados is actually underpopulated. And we're about to establish a population commission, because if I go the way that the last Minister of Education wanted us to go, it might take 25 years. And we don't have that luxury. But to put it simply, the number of persons paying taxes and participating in this economy and producing is simply too small for the quality of life that we have. And CSME is one way to buttress our numbers, but it's not going to carry us far enough. We need to have a sensible discussion as to what is the optimum size of this country's population in 50 years, and then work back and start to build it out in a managed way and in a way that makes sense. Canada has shown the world how to manage population expansion without necessarily the vagaries that everybody, especially those who may have more racist undertones, worry about. And that's why this whole, how can a world celebrate the movement of capital but cannot celebrate the movement of people? And we call people migrants. But we call the movement of capital necessary for profit and prosperity. Makes no sense. And one of the things about the Caribbean is that we have always been, in the modern Caribbean, in the post-1930s movement, we have been at the center of what has been morally right in terms of development. And I want to reinforce this, because when I asked you to go back and read Carrie Levitt's book, or to go and read Lloyd Best, or to go and read a lot, and you can read the literature equivalents of those who fought against the same movements in the form of George Lamming and Tom Clark and those who are Beijing, Kamau. What they're really saying to us is that we have the capacity to identify to the world the way forward. I promise I'll end on this point. In the last 70, 80 years, the Caribbean has achieved a phenomenal explosion in development. We're not where we want to be, but where we have come from is phenomenal without the level of bloodshed that we see in other regions in the world. And we have learned, I know about echoes, but that's a strange one. And we have learned that it is possible for people of different religions and different colors and different classes and different genders to live together in a small space. And at the very time that the world does not know how to have people from religions coexist, or how to have people of different races coexist, or how to have Even in the United States of America, you see a virtual clash of civilizations. That's what you're seeing between the Republicans and the Democrats now. And the whole argument about migration is just a euphemism for you know what. So I am saying to you that we have a story to tell the rest of the world. And the best people to tell this story are the people who are either the teachers and lecturers on this campus and the students, and you then have a duty to help unleash it in our communities, in those people's movements that I've been speaking about earlier. So I trust and pray that we can contextualize our role. Development in the formerly colonized world happened best when we were at the front line of development thought and policy. The question is, when will we regain our space? And my duty to you is to allow you to go about your duty, not only in educating our children, but in unleashing thought to be able to lead a world such that people recognize that pound for pound, that there is no greater region than the Caribbean region and the Caribbean civilization.
Good evening, everyone. Can you guys hear me? Okay, let me do that again. Good evening, everyone. Okay, so firstly, I just want to, and I'm sure this sentiment I'm about to say is echoed by every student in this room. Really want to thank you for coming here this evening. You know, your presence here is a literal personification of your support for the students of the UWI, and I think we should give her a round of applause for that. Something honestly in my, admittedly, quite short lifespan compared to some in this room, quite unprecedented. And it is something that has left an indelible impression upon me. Now, moving on to my query. So with regards to education, I am also very, very ecstatic that your administration has really placed, you know, the emphasis on education. And for me, this also strikes the core at home because I spearhead a program called the Gabriel Gay Award for Excellence in Reading and Literacy Mentorship Program. So we're the only and largest reading and rewards program on island and across the region. And we mentor remedial readers. We also reward high achievers in reading and also reward excellence across the entire curriculum from primary, secondary, and tertiary as well. Now, the thing that honestly perplexes me sometimes to the point of discombobulation sometimes, you know, is the lack of support. And I can tell you this because I founded this program at 13 years old and I've been spearheading, thank you, and thank you. And, you know, I've been spearheading this, so I speak experientially. I've been spearheading this for the last 14 years. And I'm honestly sometimes aghast at the lack of support. And let's look at the time frame in the last decade for philanthropic ventures and positive ventures when young persons like myself, and I'm sure there are other young people in this audience who are being the social animals. I love that definition you said, the social animals for the revolutionary change and imperative and permanent change that our society needs. So with this backdrop, herein lies my burning and ardent query. What is your administration's, you know, thoughts and process with regards to infrastructural as well as financial support for programs like mine, and I'm sure there are other young people as well who have a lot of positive contributions and want to know the support that is available for us all. Thank you.
Thank you. The one thing that tough times teaches you is the need for partnership. And we're going to have to partner a lot more than hitherto we did. We have a lot of government buildings lying derelict. We have a lot of government property that we can make available. There are more charitable organizations now than existed at any other stage in recent memory in this country's modern development. The Maria Holder Memorial Trust, for example, has gifted more than $46 million in charitable donations to this country, a figure that I don't think anybody else has come close to with respect to doing. And I'm saying all of this to make the point that even here at this university, part and parcel of what you enjoy has come as a result of charitable endowment and partnerships, corporate sponsorship, etc. So that I'd like to invite you to be able to work and find the other partners. If you write as well as you speak, then it should be no problem for you to be able to write a number of proposals for the larger companies in this region, many of whom still have a strong corporate social responsibility. But in addition to that, entities like the Maria Holder Trust, Dr. Henry is here, and she goes back to with me years ago when she knows that my fundamental premise in the Ministry of Education, while I was always good to UWI, my focus was primary education. And it was primary education because if you give people, my father used to say, if you give them the early groceries, they're going to last. And the truth is that all of us in here know people who left school with a good 7th standard education. And that good 7th standard education made men and women build out this country. So we need to make sure that our children know to read. And I maintain more and more. And there's a very quick way to teach them how to add, because if you tell them that if you can't add, somebody will thief you and rob you. You'll see how fast children learn to add. Because it's about life and survival. And we need also to make sure that we teach them, and this is the missing part, not just the reading, the ability to speak and to speak with confidence. We have to recognize that there's nobody who loves nation language more than me. When I'm on a platform, I can speak Bajan. But if we cannot speak English, we are sending our children out there, our young people out there, as double amputees in a world. Try negotiating this world as double amputees and see exactly what I mean. So that we have to have the honest conversation that requires us to start teaching our children how to speak with confidence in front audiences, on a one-on-one. 2 eyes must make 4, because the first thing that you tell me if you're not looking at me is they're either deceiving me or you're lacking in confidence. Real thing. And therefore, if we want our children to be the best that they can be, these are some of the things. And we can't do it in schools alone, so I welcome organizations like yours. We will play our part. Clearly, the government is not as fiscally fit as it would like to be given what we've inherited. And our duty for the next few years is to pay down debt, literally. But we have assets, and assets can be used in a very real way if you're creative. Okay? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Madam Prime Minister. You made reference to youth and development quite often. Young people today are growing in an era which can be defined by digital connectivity. Whether it is buying and selling products online, whether it's sharing your sentiments online instantly, whether it is participation in various forums, access to information, what have you. But yet, government in Barbados has been lagging when it comes to the inclusion of these things. Accessing information from government, almost you come across as a threat to them. Government tends to be very opaque. You have a situation where we often say that our human capital is our best development, aspects, but yet we have a government that's very closed off and exclusionary. So you don't get the ideas coming forward, you don't get the expertise, you don't get the knowledge coming forward, you don't facilitate these things in our institutions. To your administration's credit, there has been improvements when it comes to these areas, but that is more so your leadership as opposed to institutions dictating it. So I'm curious as to your thoughts on these matters. So that we essentially facilitate persons' ideas, because at the end of the day, cabinet does not have all the answers. We need to start to stifle ideas and just experience from our people to get the island going forward. So my question to you is really, what are your ideas on that? What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that we need to include more persons into our governance and utilizing technology, in particular, given the fact that young persons are developing on that and they can access different companies, different people all across the world, but yet their own government is closed off to them? So what are your ideas and your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I've tried to put more than 24 hours in a day, but I haven't yet been successful. So forgive us if in less than 5 months we haven't moved even quicker. Part and parcel of what we're trying to do is to revolutionize how we do things. And, nobody likes to lay off people. And believe you me, it has been the hardest thing that I've had to do as a public official, to agree to persons being laid off. But what we've tried to do is to take those persons for whom we feel there's a bright future, and for whom from next year, early next year, can come back and work with companies and digitize all of government's records. At the same time that we're doing that, I've created, as you know, a Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology, because we have literally to digitize and to introduce technology in every aspect of what we do without losing the sense of who we are and the ethical component that is so critical for us as human beings. We will have a digital ID card in Barbados, and we will announce the details of that in the near future. We have to do that because you need to be able to own your identity, and you need to be able to do things easily without having to be made to fill out each time, etc., etc. Right now, just even in terms of cabinet, we make the point all the time. To get files to cabinet, it has to leave from the minister to the, go up the back way to the secretary, to the clerical officer, to the messenger, to who can carry it in a car, to carry it to cabinet office, to carry it to give out, back out the same way. When nowadays, CabSec can send to each of us on email, bam, and from the time I receive it until we have a properly constructed system for government, we have been using other things, and within less than 5 minutes, the CabSec has an approval for a round robin with respect. We're now about to move into e-cabinet. We've also recognized that the best way to solutions is to be able to put problems out there and let people ruminate and come up with the solutions and come back. And that's been done in a number of countries. And indeed, I've been meeting today, and the minister's meeting, I think, tomorrow, with the same lady who led the hackathons, Girls in IT. And the hackathons, they did a wonderful job in Jamaica, they did a wonderful job in Trinidad. The last thing I think they did was that they had something, hashtag girls, safe girls, hashtag safe future. And these kids came up with the notion of an accessory being embedded with a microchip that you could press if the young girl or lady is in trouble, to be able to send messages to key persons of what was happening. Now, I give you that example only to say to you that I really do believe that if we put problems out there, that people will find solutions. Separate from that, what the government has done, even as we move through the BERT program, was that we have an email through which we were and still are assessing ideas for Barbados at barbados.gov.bb that persons can use. But structurally, we are going to have to move more and more to putting problems out there and asking people to solve our problems and to help us convert into a digital environment. Now, what's the real thing that we need to be doing in addition? Most of you in here know what you know on your own, not true? Because the system hasn't taught you, certainly at the primary and the secondary level. And we've just agreed with some people to be able to establish programs in coding, in artificial intelligence, and in a whole host of other things, advanced machine learning. And we want to start programs at 4 different age groups as we go forward in terms of workshops. Under 5, 3 to 5, 9 to 11, 14 to 16, and post-secondary. Why? And with each year, roll out that. And we're hoping to do this with the Maria Holder Memorial Trust as well, and some other youngsters, because we believe that this is critical. We're also talking to a major technology firm to see if they can start doing some of their summer coding camps here, because we believe that if we give Barbadians access to this, the sky is the limit. So give us some chance at the level of government. I know that the early gains are going to come with things like police certificates of character and licensing and a whole host of things. We're going to see some changes at the airport soon in terms of the machines that will allow you. I used it yesterday, and we're getting ready to be able to make it fly before the winter season for everybody. If we do that, we can remove the ED cards and other things like that. But we have to make sure, and this is the one thing I learned, and I said it this morning when we met with Invest Barbados in a half-day colloquium to be able to work out our strategy and vision for the rest of the world. I was always the one who wanted to try the first of everything, first in technology, etc. But as this country's leader, I understand fully that first best is not always right for small nations, because we need to work out the kinks, because what is at risk is a civilization and a people. So that we have to become, in cricketing terms, solid middle order batsmen, but capable of strokes that will cause people to forget that they're watching people at number 5 and number 6. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening to everyone, and good evening, Madam Prime Minister.
Good evening, ma'am.
I am happy that you spoke about education and your belief that that is our way out. I am a mother of 8 children. I am also a student at the University of the West Indies, pursuing a degree in international relations with Spanish.
International relations.
With Spanish. The thing is, I'm also one of those stenographer typists who has just lost their job. How do I reconcile with you giving me free tuition on the one hand and I'm being laid off on the other?
Because you'll be one of the first people in January, and what we've done is to try to pay you to help you get to the end of the year. But you will be one of the people who we hope will become partners and shareholders in special purpose vehicles that will come back in. And we're asking the IDB to fund it, to be able to digitize how many thousands of feet of paper? Which ministry you were in?
The Ministry of Commerce.
So you know how much paper is in there. But the Ministry of Commerce's paper is small compared to the Royal Barbados Police Force or the Law Courts or the Ministry of Education or whatever. So what we've had to do is to literally be a disruptive factor in the functioning of our government. You are here because you believe, quite correctly, that international business with Spanish is going to give you a better career.
International relations, ma'am.
International relations with Spanish is going to give you a better career for you and your children,
Yes,
correct?
please.
Similarly, therefore, we need to be able to repurpose and refashion and retrain as many of our people, and that's why the reprogram, okay, is so important, because the whole of Barbados has to become a training campus for the next 4 years. And in that, we're talking from car washers back to lawyers, from manicurists and machine operators to stenotypists and clerk typists, because in today's world, how many people still use a stenotypist? How many people use a typewriter? So I don't know how many different ways to say I'm sorry, but what I do know is that the reason why we've taken this long and this much pain is because we want to make sure that there's an opportunity for you to be able to earn a living. And for those who are not like you at university, we feel that since there is a definitive time frame to the digitization of government's records, that the one thing we must do is during that 2, 3, or 4 year period that it takes to digitize those records, for which the IDB will help us pay, that we have to expose those persons to further training, whether it is medical transcription, legal transcription, whatever other kinds of training, because the world has moved on. Goddard's company no longer runs an ice factory. That's how they made their money. And long before any of us existed, people did not have access to ice. So what they used to do to get ice? They used to traipse their way into Bridgetown and buy ice, big blocks of ice. Regrettably, how many people in here have ever seen an office use a typewriter? And that's the point I made. And I can put up my hand because for the first 10, 15 years of my life, my father's secretary had a typewriter. So it's difficult. And as I said, I regret it. But in the same way, I know that joy cometh in the morning. And I know that Minister Cavehill has been in conversation with the IDB, that we are working with technology companies to be able to bring many of you back in to be able to do the digitization of those records.
While I appreciate that, Prime Minister, I am of the view that if you continue cutting at the bottom all the time, then you won't have a foundation and the tree will fall.
Except that we're not cutting only at the bottom. So the bottom line is that we're also taking people throughout the service. Okay? And the bottom line is that what we chose was not the bottom, but the function.
I find too that as a stenotypist, I don't use a typewriter, and the days of stenos just taking notes and stuff like that, I do cabinet papers, I prepare speeches.
So you're really an admin officer?
I do some of everything.
And hopefully, once we come back in, and that's part and parcel of the problem, that the government has stayed static and used people in posts that are no longer relevant. You have therefore already pointed the direction. But whether we like it or not, I inherited $1.9 billion in arrears, Justin. $1.9 billion, Dr. Moore, which is the equivalent of making Barbados the third most indebted country in the world on top of the 152%, such that we ended up with 171% debt to GDP. The only two countries in the world that have a higher debt to GDP ratio than Barbados are Japan and Greece. And in both instances, they have options that we don't have. So what I'm trying to say, and let's be real, a lot of lashes came out to us on the debt restructuring. I almost feel that Barbadians don't appreciate how difficult this moment in time is for this nation, because the government has made it almost seamless for you. And we made it seamless because we did a number of things. One, within 1 week of coming to government, in fact, within 1 week of the election, I spoke to the head of the IMF. And she indicated, oh, you have to do what? Blah, 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 blah. And I said, excuse me, ma'am. My people need breakfast. You cannot go on a long journey without breakfast. And that there were certain things that we needed to put in place in order to allow us to do the adjustments. Two, when the former Minister of Finance talked about debt restructuring, and I'm prepared to sit down if I am misleading, he spoke in the budget about a $70 million debt restructuring program for contingent liability. Am I not talking the truth? We have just entered into a debt restructuring program that will save the government of Barbados the equivalent of 10,000 public servants' salary a year. $500 million in interest. Now, if I did not have the luxury of negotiating that debt restructuring program, I regret to tell you that it's not only the students up here that would not be receiving an education, it's not only the faculty up here that would have gone home, but it is also 2/3 of the central government, 10 out of 15,000 people that would have gone home in this country. Now, I will speak further to this weekend, because the country needs to stop and to pause and to understand where on the precipice it has found itself. And I'm going to ask those persons from up here at Cave Hill and elsewhere to please exercise the leadership in being able to speak to the country on some of these issues as well, because this is where we are. Now, we learned from Jamaica. Jamaica chose to restructure domestic debt alone. We said no because we realized that Jamaica ought to have restructured probably both domestic and external. It is difficult. It's difficult for the pensioners. It's difficult for the savers. It's difficult for everybody. But you know why? For the last 5-6 years, we exercise silence. And the silence meant that instead of dealing with the toe, and a diabetic patient, when you could have dealt with a toe, it's no longer a toe, it's no longer a foot, it's no longer from the knee down. It may not even be the whole leg, it may be sepsis. And that is the point that we need to make. Now, have I said it's not going to be easy, but what we have tried to do is to walk what I believe in. And I've said all along, and I've said it to the point where I think Dr. Robinson will tell you that the bankers have cursed me from larboard to starboard. You understand? That the burden must be shared fairly. And why do I feel so? Because for the last 10 years, the banks made $1.5 billion in profits at the very time you were not getting a salary increase as a stenotypist in this country for 8 years. Now, it bleeds my heart. And that's why I tell you that I'm establishing a household mitigation unit, because I will not sleep well until all like you who have been the victim of layoffs in this country are put back in a position to structure yourself and your living in a way that's credible and brings integrity to you and your family. And I give you that commitment. Thank you. It is when, don't move here, it is when I get angry with what others have done to this country. And when people say, well, just lock them up. If you want us to lock them up, come forward with the evidence. But the bottom line is that we have allowed our country, we know it, we knew it, we smelt it, we felt it, and we kept silent.
And that is
all
what
that I've had to do now is to come in, and I'm trying now, how can we correct this situation with minimal dislocation to everybody? I give you the assurance that not only will you be able to finish your education, but you must have an opportunity for work in this country. Mercifully, Ross University has said that they will give all persons from government who have been laid off a 5-day advantage on anybody else who applies to them, okay, with respect to being able to hire them. We're trying to do the same with other private sector employers. For those who are going, who are not stenotypists, and the notion that we are only letting go stenotypists is the Dennis Kellman approach that 80 is less than 20, or 20 is more than 80. Because last time I checked, there are more men, regrettably, that are going home because of MTW. And why? Because the government has $100 million in road works from CDB, IDB, and CAF to execute now. Some you will see from tonight, because we had to tell them you can't do it in the middle of the day. And then we have, and I do the tour on Friday, we have sandals or beaches, whatever you want to call it, starting a $900 million project in Speightstown. That's the meeting I just came from, with all of the planning officials at Parliament that I left the AG cheering for me, because that project will start in January. Sagicor has a major senior citizens village at Boarded Hall that's also starting in January. And there are a number of other projects that we believe that the people who are being laid off from the Ministry of Public Works, 299 or whatever the number is, that they will be able to get work. So we've tried, wherever possible, to locate as many of you, and the ones that we can't locate directly now, I'm satisfied that the growth that will come, because what is Ross University? Ross University is the equivalent of, it's 1,500 students and 100 faculty, taking intake in January, May, and September. So they're effectively all year round. And that's the equivalent of 75,000 7-day tourists in Barbados next year before a single plane lands on the 1st of January. Now that's going to create its own economic activity. I don't need to tell you that. You know better than me how to measure it. So it means that many of you who regrettably are being laid off now, but for whom we are compensating, will be able, outside of the structured activities that I've spoken about, will also get jobs. But it is still not easy, and I apologize to you.
Thank you, Mama. I appreciate your apology.
Thank you. The other thing that we've done is that we've also put another buffer of $5 million to be able to help persons who really are going through difficulties, and we will do so in a dignified manner. Let me also say, because you know there's some people who get excitement from being able to get a front page in a newspaper. And I've passed that stage a long time. Nobody's going to tell you that it was one department that had problems fundamentally last week. And Minister Moore is dealing with that department now with school meals. There were one or two others who were uncertain. Why? Because when the list, and we don't see names, we see length of service, that's all. Don't want to see a single name. Because if I don't see it, nobody can blame me. We said nobody with 10 years or 9 years should be going home. And we felt that largely because in many instances it would be difficult. What we did, for the most part, when the security guards went home last week, everybody went home with the checks. Regrettably, some ministries have not gotten their act together to give people the checks. Am I happy about it? Absolutely not. But to say that that is a representation of the entire public service is a lie. And this notion that you are going to continue to badger and attack public servants for conduct is something that I've said to the head of the civil service he needs to come and defend. Because Barbados has some excellent public servants, and that we have had a comparative advantage because of them. Do we get it right all the time? No. And is there a problem that we can, you said it earlier, can we find a more effective way to do some of the things in the public service than we've been doing for 50 and 60 and 70 years? Yes, we can. But regrettably, we haven't done it this going now as perfect as we should have. Sorry, Christian. And then back to you.
Hi, good evening, Prime Minister. I promise I don't have a essay type question. This is a two-mark question. Let me just begin by thanking you not only on behalf of the students at the Cavehill campus, but also on the Cavehill community for taking time out I know your busy schedule to be with us here today. Also, for reaffirming to every Barbadian national that their access to the University of West Indies will never be tampered. So thank you, Prime Minister, on that behalf.
And while you're at it, I want to thank you, because most people should know that this is not the first time I'm meeting you, and that you and your colleagues came to see me when I was in opposition to put forward the case for exactly what you thanked me for. So the congratulations is equally yours.
Now let's go into my question.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. So, upon listening to your speech, and trust and believe it's a very well-tailored, crowd-engaging speech, and I appreciate that. You mentioned two important, I don't want to call them policies, but practices that you, in your opinion, would advance the social development of Barbadians on a whole. That being, in 10 years, every individual under 18 years old must be able to swim and be bilingual.
Yeah, there
now,
are two or three others that I didn't mention, but entrepreneurship, arts, exposed to arts, and exposed to sports.
and I congratulate that.
Thank you, Chelsea.
Very simple ways to effect change in the community. However, you also spoke about the aftermath of human behavior when natural disasters hit, especially with the commodities of food and water. Now, since I have this opportunity to ask you, in your opinion as Prime Minister, what simple mechanisms proactively can we as individuals do to prevent that type of behavior?
But I think there's a number of things. One is advocacy in terms of forming a movement, because the world does not believe that this is a major issue. For some people, it's about saving profits. For us, it's about saving lives. And therefore, the power of advocacy among our young people is critical. Two, change in behavior. we continue to do the things that we shouldn't do. How many people leave water on when they're brushing their teeth? How many people turn the shower on long before they get in it? How many people need to change? Let me understand what I mean? How many people need, and I've asked the Water Authority to look at this, because we probably need to get a low interest or a no interest revolving fund so that people can change out their toilets to water saving toilets and their shower heads and all of these things, because those simple things will mean that you can control how much your bill is, even if rates have to go up in the future. So it's about cultural change and it's about advocacy.
Pleasant good evening to
I'm
you.
going to leave in about 15 minutes because I have to go and meet Christian's Prime Minister for a dinner meeting to come back late tonight. So, in Trinidad. Miss Jordan can't wait. The plane is not going to leave us. It's an RSS plane. But the truth is that Prime Minister Rowley is waiting for me to meet him in Port of Spain for 8:30. So I have to make sure that we can get there still. You know the highway better than me, Christian.
Good evening. A pleasant good evening to you, Madam Prime Minister. I'm going to be very short. I am currently completing, well, you have made it possible for me to complete my last year in my creative program because of the change in fees. And I really do appreciate that extremely. What is, just a simple question, what is, when it comes to our culture and our arts, what does the ministry have, what plans does the ministry have for those people who are completed degrees over at the Arabara Center? And for me, I have put a lot of effort into giving back to the community because I've done lots of theater work, film work and stuff for the secondary schools free of cost, you know. And but what I'm saying is that I'm thinking that not enough emphasis is being placed on our culture, and we have a product that we have here that can be financially viable, and I don't think that it's tapped into enough. The ministry hasn't looked into it enough to make it that way, and we have our own culture. We have things.
You're pushing an open door there. Anybody who knows me will tell you that my biggest passion is culture. I tell people if I could sing, I wouldn't be here. For real.
So
and that when I leave this, I go to make movies. And because we have a story to tell.
We do.
So here's what's happening. Once again, we're limited fiscally. So the things that I would like to do immediately, like the capitalization of a major fund, I've got to find ways of doing it that will allow you, if you make money, you pay back the fund because it's really a low interest loan. If you don't make money, we write it off. I've been trying to get Flow, and when it was not Flow, from cable and wireless days, and Digicel to understand that they have the conduits. What they don't have is the content. And therefore what they need to do is to come together and help us capitalize the funds and make available an IDC building. Let us put in a green screen, work with the university if necessary, and work with those telecoms entities through partnership and try to create the opportunities, because your market has to be global. The minute you believe that your market is local, you're not going to make money, or you're not going to be able to sustain what you're doing.
Well, that's my point, because my thing is that we do have something to sell to the world. And
but what you need is the seed. You need the infrastructure, you need the sound stage, you need the ability to be able to have access to capital. So I'm saying to you that I don't have the money now. I wish I did. It's my greatest regret that I've inherited a government that doesn't have that money. But if it did, or if we can work with the major players of capital, Flow runs what? Cable. CBC is going hopefully digital, even as it does its restructuring. Digicel needs and runs what? Cable. Why are they not working with us to create that kind of fund that allows you, I say first, low interest loans, because if you make money, pay it back and let others come through. And if you don't make money, we write it off. But that's what we have trust loans for. And the trust loans starting at 5 and 10,000, and that may seem small to you, but I have seen some people do some things with some phones that will blow your mind. internationally and locally. And I think once we just keep doing it, do it in the bite-sized chunks that we can. Believe you me, if it is good, people are going to see it and people are going to come. We will eventually help you in the creative economy with promotion and distribution and marketing, because you don't have access to the working capital to deal with promotion, distribution, and marketing. Although we accept that technology gives you an advantage that when I was managing bands, we didn't have.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Right, good evening. I just have some simple questions for you since you have to leave soon. I just want to know
I'm
where...
going back, though.
No problem, you can shout me when you get back.
I will.
Okay, I just wanted to know why is it so hard to get from one major place, which would be the University of the West Indies, to Warrens. As far as I'm concerned, it should not be so hard to get from point A to point B. Right, so you don't have to give me
I
a...
thank you for bringing it to my attention, but you know what it is? Because we have a linear system that has not changed from the 19th
From
and
that would be
20th century.
2014 would be the
You understand?
ABC
Because
highway road.
remember when we were growing up, what the bus stops used to say? To town and out of town. So that Warrens was not town. Don't mind that Warrens developed.
Right.
But I hear you. We'll fix
Okay.
it.
And then I have the next question. Will there be a chance of bus lanes being implicated onto the highway? Because if I could, I would have ride to school or whatever, but there is no bike lane, and I'm scared to get next to a bus and other motorcycle men. But
It's actually interesting that you should say so, because we were discussing it only last week, and with respect to making it possible, ironically, for the people living at Ross to be able to bike to school at Sherburne. And similarly, it was then raised, well, why don't we just make sure that we have bike lanes across the entire highway? So I think Minister Duguid is going to look at it, and it makes sense because we're trying to fight chronic NCDs, which means that we need more people moving. Okay? Thank you.
I have one more for you.
You
Okay,
give me ideas, you didn't give me questions.
Well, these are questions that if
So
I
I'm
had
very
the,
happy.
if I had the funds to do myself, I would have done. But unfortunately,
Therefore, there's something called trust loans starting. And trust loans,
right.
trust
but-
loans is where we take a chance on you.
Okay, but next question I have is that Barbadians are going to spend money either way. We see that. So why don't we put the solar powers to permanently run houses? That way, instead of spending money on the electricity bill and what's not, they can spend it into something
That's
else.
what we're working on perfectly. And let me say, what's your name?
Oh, sorry, darling.
My name is Justin Rochford, and my uncle works for you at Bushall constituency, Mr. Tony Tottenham.
I got unfair your uncle now and tell him that I now need him to retire and bring you on. Seriously, those are the kinds of practical ideas that we need. And there's absolutely no reason for there not to be some kind of bus link between here and Warrens. There's too much commercial activity. And
Yeah, it's true.
yeah. Yeah, but you need something that is more commercial and viable, because the truth is, forget the university even for a minute. You have a major settlement in Paradise Heights and Wanstead and Oxford and all of that, and everything goes to Bridgetown, but yet Warrens has become a commercial center in and of itself with major government departments and services. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, good evening. I'm not a Barbadian student, but I'm presuming that you're here for all of us.
Yes.
Good. So it is on this note I'm going to bring up this query. I started here in 2015. I came up here only because my husband got a job here. And when I came here, we had to apply for a student visa for my 2 underage children who cannot be anywhere else but with their parents.
You listened to my CARICOM speech in Jamaica, Mona?
I didn't,
Okay, well, if you
but
did-
I will.
Look, you heard me talk about xenophobia just so I'm not being trying to be rude to cut you, but I'm conscious that P.S. Jordan will drag me out of here any minute. Look, Barbados cannot have two categories of residents for education and health. It's a very simple point. If we do, we are then going to have an underclass of persons who have been denied access to education. And the worst thing you can do in a small space is to have a bright person who has been denied opportunities for education. That's why I'm committed to paying for you here as well. So that we need, I was Minister of Education for 7 years. I never asked a CARICOM person for a student visa for any child, largely because I understood that if you leave people out of school, you're creating an underclass of persons. Secondly, if you deny them basic primary health care, nobody, TB don't know class, color, nor anybody thinks so, or nationality. And therefore, we are committed to being able to create and sustain an environment, a public health environment, and a basic education environment. We won't pay for your students, your children at university,
Right,
but we will pay for them to have access to basic education in this country.
So I'm assuming that that policy will be scratched off pretty soon.
No, but we will do it.
Wonderful.
I've said so.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, good night, madam.
And it is to protect the majority. That's the only way we're going to be able to protect Bajans in their own homeland. Yes.
Hi, good night. I too am a retrenched worker. I have only been working for 2 years, 11 months. While I understand the situation that the country is in, and I know that you have to make some decisive action, I am leaving my department tomorrow. And honestly, if I didn't have a daughter, I would go and I would volunteer to help my department, because I realize with all these stenographers and clerical officers leaving, the continuity is like people are scrambling. So what I am pleading for you to do is to like go to the civil service and look at the departments and try to work on continuity, because there is work backed up and we have not left yet.
Let me tell you what I did instead of being able. Parliament broke at 1:30. I called a meeting of all ministers and MPs on our side. Joke aside. But it was for two purposes. One, that ministers need to be able to understand how the workflow in their ministries will be negatively affected by the dismissals or the layoffs that are taking place now. And that we need to be able to re-engineer workflows and processes, as you've just said. If not, what will happen? Things will fall through the cracks. Now, in some instances, we can do it through technology. In other instances, we do it by changing how things flow or the decision-making process, correct?
Yes.
And that's what I've asked ministers to do, and to ensure that they can report back to me in the next few days that they're managing that process in each individual ministry. So you're absolutely correct. And as I said, I hope that you will be one of the ones that can have access to work, either, if not at Ross or any of those private sector entities, through the digitization program that we're hoping to launch in January.
Yeah, and another point I have is that I understand that, because obviously all of the people that I work with in my section have been affected. But my thing is like people are saying to us, go to the private sector and look for employment, go this place and look for employment. But my thing is, I have worked in the private sector prior to being a government employee, and I know for sure people cry down public servants, but I go to work and I work hard for my money, because I understand that when I go to work and I put in my work, I can help the development of Barbados. So I go to work and I work hard, and I have been given the opportunity to study and work.
Remember what I told you was my favorite song from Jimmy Cliff?
Yes.
You can get it if you really want.
If you really want.
And I suspect that I will see you in the future in the public service of Barbados again.
I hope so.
Because you seem to have a passion for it.
Yes, I do, but the thing is, for me, the private sector, I am in classes with students and they're not giving, to me, I don't know if if it is that they're selfish, but to me it's like they don't give these students the opportunity to come to class. They're always like, it's always money oriented. They don't seem to me like they're interested in our development. So I am asking that you can at least talk to some people in private sector and see if they can assist in.
Well, I'm not hearing the end of her statement.
I am asking that maybe you can perhaps like put the conversation in the private sector to let them know how important education is and giving people time, even if you're asking them to put it back, but to just
Agreed.
be
Education and
Yeah.
training, and as I said, from car washers right back through to lawyers and doctors, the whole of Barbados has to retrain for the next 3-4 years, because that's the only way we're going to exhibit global standards and get the business to get out of this.
Okay.
Thank you. What's your name?
Vanessa.
Vanessa?
Yeah.
Thank you. What ministry you in?
I work at the Land Registry Department.
Okay, well, that may actually be one of the ones that will have opportunities for the future, because we're going into a public-private partnership, we hope, taking the corporate registry, the land registry, and taking out the vital statistics component of the Supreme Court registry, turning it into a public-private partnership, and also allowing the workers who are still there to have shares in it with the partner that we choose from Canada. Okay? Thank you. One last, and then I go.
Hi, good day.
I'm coming back in through. Next time I come back, I'm coming back in a pair of jeans and a shirt.
Good day.
Good day.
My name is Christoph Henry. I'm from St. Vincent.
You have a powerful name,
Yes.
even if inverted. For Charleston, I say, Will I am.
Yes, and Barbados has been a nice experience so far. So, I've been looking at the UN 70, the 73rd UN Assembly, and I've seen your speech in addition to the Prime
Comrade.
Minister.
Comrade.
Yes.
He gave a good
And-
speech.
Yes. And most of the cries is being seen in the fight against climate change. We are not seeing the island states. We are not seeing as basically anybody, right? And you pointed out one of the things we need to do is to be a people's movement,
Yeah.
right? And at this university, you have many students from different island states coming here, Vincentian, Trinidadians, and so on. And you say one of the things we have to do is for boys and girls, be that change to them, right? In addition, right? Well, how, with all these students from the different island states, how is the administration being a change to us, an inspiration, right? Where it would go a long way in that when I go home and anything comes on the news about Barbados, I will pay keen attention to that. And you say now to be a people's movement, right? If this administration just be a change to us, the other territories who come here to study, right? I know our government, they assist us and so on, but there's still some of us who come on our own, for example, like me, through student loans, right? So what can the administration or, well, UWI do to students coming here, in being a change to them? So years on, when they go back to their homes, now we can move in the fight for climate change. So if, let's say, Barbados is pushing ahead with something, I can be home in St. Vincent and I can, be for that movement and try to contribute.
The truth
in
is,
some
you
way.
can be part of that movement from wherever you are in the world. And that's the benefit of that instrument you're holding in your hand. Because more often than not, it's going to be a virtual movement. With respect to the difficulties that yourself and others may face, I can only stress to the administration that more and more, I think we need, even where governments like ours are standing up to it, to be able to have more scholarships available and more support available to persons, not just from the university, but I'd like to believe that the corporate sectors in most of these countries in the Caribbean would be prepared to come and sponsor persons to make life a little easier for you. But ultimately, I would like to say, watch me and let me see how I can turn this country around so that all who are here who regrettably are laid off tonight, and all like yourself, can find enough work in this country to be able to sustain yourself. Because ultimately that's what it's about. If we can literally spark confidence back to have enough economic activity in this country, we will probably have a shortage of labor again. And that's where we want to get, and that's the change that we want to get to as well, in addition to your mentoring others who come. So hold tight. Let's see how we can get there. But in the meantime, don't wait until we get there to start being a movement and an advocate for climate change. But the world is going every day. And we have 2020 and 2030 are two definite dates that we can't cross at certain levels. So help us, help you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Colleagues, special invited guests, students, the Prime Minister has sown the seed for us to extend this evening into, she came to have a domestic conversation and local conversation. It has gone regional and she's invited us, I extended it for us to go global as well. And I would invite you please to show your appreciation and give her another round of applause. Before we bring this to a formal closing, and I've asked the Prime Minister for just 30 seconds, a crave for indulgence to wrap this up properly, I want to invite our principal to present to the Prime Minister just a token of our appreciation from the campus for her coming here this evening to deliver an address to us. So I take this opportunity on behalf of the campus principal, Professor Eugene Barto, to thank the Prime Minister Motley for her continuing commitment to the Cavehill campus and indeed to the University of the West Indies. It has been a fitting address to culminate the 2018 graduation season, where the atmosphere has been buoyant and celebratory over the past few weeks. There's no doubt that her words were well received, and we extend to Ms. Motley, as the principal just stated, an open invitation, and as she herself has said, to return to Cavehill for further installments of these intimate discussions with the campus community. We will be happy to host this forum as a series, held as frequently as needed or as her schedule permits. To the offices of the principal and the campus registrar, thank you for your efforts to facilitate this visit. Hosting a sitting Prime Minister is no easy feat, and with all of the attendant protocols to be observed. There will be no doubt that Ms. Motley would have been welcomed warmly and made to feel right at home on the campus. For this, we also thank the Director of Security and his team for assuring a safe and secure environment. Thanks are also extended to the Educational Media Services Department and Campus IT for ensuring that all of the Prime Minister's activities were appropriately supported from a technical standpoint. We extend thanks to the Maintenance Department for readying these facilities in which we hosted the Prime Minister. Thanks also to the media for joining us this evening to cover this conversation with the Prime Minister. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, thanks to all of you who joined us for this discussion. We trust that you found it to be engaging and informative. As an academy, we take great pride in being able to host a forum where we can hold the tensions of healthy dialogue and intellectual debate. Thank you and do have a good night.